Hello YouTube, and today I have another video for you guys. If I sound a bit weird, I had like a allergy problem, so I'm just recovering from that. But someone in the comments asked me to make a video on how do you pick your countries in the early game, and I decided to also tell you today how you're gonna pick your strategies as well, because those two kind of go hand in hand. So getting right into this, a country is picked basically to start the game, and we're gonna get to in the second where we're at the lobby and not actually in the game. And you pick the country to win the objective and of course achieve a victory, and the strategy will help achieve that, so we'll get to that later. So today I will help you in picking these to achieve your AtWar or improve, I guess, your AtWar play. So how do you pick your country? Well, the starting lobby screen, it gives a lot of information on picking a country even before the game starts. So there's a couple considerations that you want to consider before you even get a tier list of the countries you're gonna pick. The first one being the map. Of course, you guys know AtWar has a lot of maps, so the countries, and some maps you're not gonna probably know the countries before you get in the game, so it's still nice to know the map once we get into it, and the map geography, so like how players will interact with the map, especially if you're having that first pick. With like games and maps that aren't played that much, of course you're not going to have that information, but these other things will be nice to use, so you can still get a good pick without being at a full disadvantage. The second thing we have is the starting funds. Now 3k, 5k, 10k, 50, all the way up to 50k. You want to know this because, and I'll show it once we're in game more, but there's certain amounts of countries cost certain amounts of gold or the funds, and you want to be able to use these. And tying in with that, you need to know the income and troop expenses, which is more in-game as well. And a lot of these things are in-game, but I'm showing you this from the starting lobby just so you know that a lot of these things that we consider are basically already in the starting lobby. And the income and troop expenses help how and when you will expand, because you need to know at what point do you need to start getting your income up, or you need to start with a good income at the beginning, or how are you going to do that. The amount of players, which is right here, is also very crucial because it helps you know how many people you're going to be fighting and help you prepare for how many people you have to be, of course, prepared for. And we have the maximum allies and enemies, which I'll also get to in a second, which is basically saying who or how many people can help you and how many enemies are you going to face in picking your country, because that is a very big thing. You also want to know your objective, so going into the victory screen, there's many victory conditions. For example, someone playing a capture player country might not start with a big enough country that doesn't have a big expansion than someone on total annihilation. So you definitely want to know how and what the victory conditions are, especially if it's a capture neutral country, which I've not seen that much, because then of course the location of your country is very, very crucial. We also have the game duration, and that's basically telling you how many times are you gonna have to be forced to play 10, 25 turns, which is basically you have to be in the action most of the time, just in case you don't kill all your enemies so you win by SP, or you're gonna have 500 turns, which most people won't get to. I barely can have gotten games where I got to 200, so are you gonna have that in limited time and measures unlimited, of course, to fight everything and try to win. And then the last thing we have is advanced. Basically this is where you see the maximum and not alliances, So if this is 0, you have to fight everyone to FFA. If this is any number here, of course you can ally as many people as you want. And then there's the initial countries, which really isn't used that much in world map, I would say. I see it more in something called RP, which is a totally different type of picking, and it doesn't really matter what you pick there, but I will get to sort of the modern RP set, how you pick those as well later in the video. Alright, so let's start our game here. And let's go in more in depth and what I'm talking about here. So as we can see, we have this world map. This is the map, of course, and the map geography is basically the way the players want to interact with the map. So, for example, in a regular world map game with 10 to 20, or let's just say there's 10 players, usually there's going to be 1 to 2 people in the US, there's going to be 1 to 2 people in South America and Africa, but usually only 1 in Africa, simply because in the world map, Africa isn't the best unless you really know what you're doing, and it's very extensive in the way you play. One thing you also want to consider, now that I'm thinking about it, is your play style. Because you have access to so many countries, you have access to different play styles, and you get to pick which play style you want to pick. In Europe, there's usually about 2 to 3 people, sometimes even 4, and then the Middle East, there's usually a person on India in 50k, and in China there's 1 to 2 people, with the occasional person in Australia and maybe Japan. So as you can see, you're not going to want to pick, for example, a country way down here in South America, or south as in south of the continental Africa, because simply you're not going to have much action there, and it's not going to be very worth it, because of course all the cities here for expansion aren't too good. One thing you also want to look at is the units. Of course, for regular maps you're going to know the units probably, but in the other maps, in the range and stuff, you're not going to know the units, so you don't want to get stuck with a place that doesn't have good units or expansion. So, for example, the next thing we have is starting funds. Now, in 50k, what a lot of people do is they'll pick a European country, because as you can see, the income here is actually very, very nice. And so once you get an expansion, you don't even have to worry about units. While in places like Asia, you can make more units than you have your income, so you have to get a very, very good expansion and kind of curve out that expansion in those terms, I guess, if you're going to be 50k. While in the United States, you're basically fighting one person, and then you get to choose when you send, or 1 to 3 if someone picks Mexico, if you want to ship your, and usually people use Marines in long games, and that's again going back to your play style on how you play. You also have the amount of players, we already covered that, and alliances and enemies. Our objective, of course, would be to capture player country, which means we're fine. You can find these stuff in the info as well. We also have game duration 50, which is like, most of the time people can get to it if you're playing fast enough, especially if you're playing a USA, which is why they're so powerful in world map, if they know what they're doing. Finally, the initial countries. We have 1 initial country. So India is also a very good pick in world map 50Ks, simply because it costs 19,000, but you're getting 1k per turn, and by the time you're at that turn 4 or something expansion, while the Middle East is income in total isn't the best, you're gonna have still enough money to the point where you can basically rush Europe before you need to worry about income, or you can rush Asia and then you have a really nice income. Same with uh, most of these things. You also have to consider the countries available to your enemies. India right now is kind of the best one because even with unit balancing, you get more units. And so unless someone has a very good expansion, they're not going to be able to really compete until India loses its money. And it starts with 31k, which is really good for world map 50k. Especially if you have like PD in a certain strategies, what I'll get to in a second. For example, in world map 50k, it doesn't make sense to pick China Northwest here unless you're planning on expanding over here and in Uzbekistan region and Kazakhstan and China. And usually there's 1 to 2 players in China, so you also have to consider that if someone picks China South or China North, especially China North, they're at a better advantage at taking China than you are with the Northwest, and you're more spread. If there's an India and he decides, I don't want to ally you, you're basically screwed. So again, map geography, you want to know how your enemies will react. That's why countries in world map 50k as opposed to 5ks and 10ks, you don't want to pick countries, let's say Thailand or Vietnam, because around them are better choices and your money is going to be used more efficiently. Indonesia can be an okay pick. The problem is its isolation, and that goes back to the map. Is your expansion going to be good enough? That's why you see players mainly picking on the Eurasian side of things in a 50k. Let's say I was playing in a 50k. I like to play a playstyle where I basically just try to get a gradual increase in units, so by the time I'm hitting Europe, I can power through them. Or if I take over India, or I ally India, I can have access to USA just in case his war has been very short. Alright, so let's say I was going to pick China North. So this is a 50 duration game. I'm picking China North because it's a strong pick. I can expand in China fairly easily. My income is going to be manageable up until the point where I don't need to manage it. And I have access to either trying to stop anyone in Europe or even the USA. So I'm picking a very versatile playstyle. So then I need to pick my strategy to assist that, right? So looking at this right now, I'm going to probably need, especially since I'm in China, which is very, usually in a world map game, and I'll get to an example in a second, it's very populated. So we need to pick. Stealth units are okay, but really you're going to run out of money fast if you pick. It's like spamming tanks. Although you might not run out of money fast, you might not have the best expansion. China North is about, really, if you're trying to beat other Chinas in world map 50k, about being very brute force and expanding very early in the game so you can have those extra units to come back. So I'm already going to try to have to take things that help me expand. So we have narrowed it down to stuff like Naval Commander, Blitzkrieg, Sky Menace, maybe even, I haven't looked at these ones, but I know that these might not be the best. Guerrilla Warfare, we're starting in a 50k. If we were like in a 3k or something where you didn't have much money, Guerrilla Warfare would help you save money and build tons of units with just straight really good militia. But we're not playing that game, so we'd opt to go for a more powerful strategy. I really like Sky Menace, and I have a very good expansion if I pick Sky Menace. With Sky Menace, and let's acquire, we can, of course, have 8 5 bombers, which are really good because they have very good range. They have almost double the range of a tank, as you can see. 7, if we were picking a different, to 17 is huge. We have very good transport, so we can expand very fast, and we have very powerful units. So the cost of bombers really outweighs the benefits. If we were to pick Master of Stealth, we would have very strong units, yes, but we wouldn't have the good expansion. Whereas Master of Stealth is very good for USA here, because you can basically choose to send submarines anywhere and be stealthy about it, which is surprising. So that's how you pick your strategy. You have to have it assist your play style and how you want to win, and help you assist how you're going to play. So now let's get into some real examples, and I'll be right back. So let's get into an example. Let's say we're picking a teams, and this is something I also wanted to cover. So covering it in the example is very nice. Let's say we were playing a team game. Basically, you get to pick in a preset. If you were playing, let's say you're playing a preset team game. Even in presets, it's very easy. You pick the span of land, and usually in most presets, sometimes there is or isn't an expansion. In this case, you get to choose, do you want to go straight for the attacking, or do you want to go straight for the expanding and stuff like that. In presets, you basically have to pick the strategy, put more time into the strategy. Let's say I was picking this place. You look at your enemies around you, since you know who they are, and in this case you have brown, and this place would be here, and you see there's not very good expansion. So if I was going to pick the Isengard place, then we would probably pick something like Perfect Defense or Iron Fist, simply because the HP of all the units are something that we can use to give ourselves an advantage. In presets and team games, and especially team games, it's not so much how the countries you pick as well as how you're working with your team. So if your team picks and you pick a synergetic, I guess, country to that team, you're going to be at a so much better time than the other team, of course. Alright, so here's another world map example. We are looking at, or it's not a world map, but it is a sort of Eurasia, I guess, without Africa. So yeah, Eurasia. As you can see, we have a player in China. I don't think they're done picking, but we do have a lot of people in our Europe, as you can see. So if we're gonna pick, of course, we know that there's a lot of people in Europe. There's not much expansion here, and I'm pretty sure this is a 50k game, simply because someone picked India. But if it isn't, India isn't the best pick, because, well, yes, unless you're getting the max expansion. In this case, with India, you might want to pick Blitzkrieg, because you need to get that money fast, or Imperialist, where you can get a lot of money without it hurting you, because infantry spam is always nice. Right here we have a player picking Russia Volga, which, if this is a 25k is okay, but if it's a 50k, you definitely wanted to pick Russia Central, because you had access to the Volga and the northwest and the south already easily, and it would have picked. If we were picking, personally, I would have picked either Japan or somewhere like China South, simply because, well, unless I am not allying India. If I ally India, then I would pick China South. If I wasn't, then I would probably pick something more along the lines of China Northeast, or even Japan. Probably Japan, because it has better access here. The problem with picking Japan, I think, is looking at it, is that China North could easily just expand to here and here, while I can only expand to China Southeast, and that would be a problem. And he could take a risk in hoping I don't expand here with anything crazy. So that would be the problem. It'd be very easy for China North to take almost all of China without being too threatened, which is why China North right here was a very, very good pick, because it's not really threatened an expansion by India, but it really hurts anyone who picks on the east of it, which is why actually I would probably not pick China South. If I had to pick in Asia, I'd pick Japan and pick something like a naval commander or something that could help me stop China North here. So anything really. I'm not really thinking that good about the strategies right now, but China North would have to be thought when we're picking that strategy. So like something like Blitzkrieg, where I can get to China South fast enough, or even somehow get to China South, Vietnam, and be able to stop this guy from expanding too hard over the whole countries of, or cities of China, and we could have access to China Northeast. The other option we could have is something like this guy, where we pick Turkey. We try to expand enough to where we have enough to kind of fend off India while still being able to hold Europe, in which that case I would probably pick something like Perfect Defense, simply because it helps us guard on both sides, and it would help us in taking over the objective here. It's a 50 turns, it looks like. Capture enemy and hold it for 1 turn. So in this one, you also have to have the option, because it's hold the capital for 1 turn, you have the option of just trying to rush and then take over China North. So let's say I was picking, and I picked Japan, right? I have the option of instead saying, oh, who cares about these guys? I try to take over China Southeast, China Northeast, and then on turn 3, don't even give China North time to react. On turn 3, I wall here so he can't get units, and I rush his capital, and I would win on the turn that I finish. So that is how you have to think about picking, because as you can see, if you did that, you would have gotten China Northeast and China Southeast, and now you win on the first turn already, because you just rush him. In that case, Blitzkrieg would be the pick. Alright, in our last example here we have a Europe game that I believe is Europe 10K, and here is a very kind of interesting pick. Now, in usually Europe 10Ks, you want to pick something like Ukraine or United Kingdom, but someone picked Russia Central. You know the map is going to be almost instantaneous action, so you're going to want something that can really fight with Turkey, Germany, France, and Russia here. So while UK is always good, it could help from denying Germany from UK. You don't really want to pick Spain unless you plan on using Italy to, or you could possibly pick Spain and expand it to the UK and Italy and try to block off Turkey. The other thing that you could possibly do is pick something like Russia Northwest. If I were picking, I would actually pick Spain, simply because I have access to the UK. It shields me from Germany and Turkey for a bit, especially if I go for Italy, and I just have to deal basically one-on-one up until I expand too far. So if this was me, I would have probably picked Spain if I had this last pick here, whereas if I had the first pick, I would have probably picked Turkey, simply because I like this playstyle where you start in the corner and expand upwards. And as you can see, France here really thought about that, using probably just regular perfect defense, I believe, to take Italy and Spain to, so now he gets to expand. If I was picking Spain, the strategy I would have picked would be either naval commander, simply because it helps you get that early expansion, and then I'd have to quickly fight, because Of course, I don't win the late game with Naval Commander, or I would pick Perfect Defense and, of course, slowly just overpower my opponents with Italy and or the UK. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and improved your AtWar play with this video by implementing this when you're picking countries, if you needed help picking countries and strategies. And see you later.